All right, let's get underway. So Nick Therkelsen, am I pronouncing that correctly? Your last name? I've
You
actually
are.
never.
You are.
Yeah, awesome.
Therkelsen-Terry is the whole mouthful.
Yeah, awesome. Really good to have you on the show. I guess I'm not sure if I'm ready to call it a show, but we're just going to roll with it.
I
Nick,
think it
you're
sounds like the show.
CEO of Max Kelsen, big data and machine learning consultancy based in Queensland. Now, Nick, we're going to start with the tough questions right off the bat. What is your favorite food, your favorite hobby, and your favorite movie?
Wow. You've really thrown out the tough questions. Favorite food is a tough one. I think it's probably, if I had to pick anything, it'd be there's a dish in northern Thailand that's like it's a chicken cooked over embers, marinated in like lemongrass and ginger and Thai chilies, and it's served with tons of fish sauce and a papaya salad. And to me, that is just
Mm-hmm.
perfection.
And you're a
Um,
bit of a foodie, is that correct?
I do, which is following into my favorite hobby, which is probably cooking. Uh,
Oh,
hence why the first question was so difficult to answer.
awesome. And do you have a favorite movie?
I don't know if I do have a favorite movie. I love
Or,
movies, but there's just so many of them, right?
or
Um,
maybe a TV show?
oh, I reckon I can find something for movie. It's a great question. It's a really great question. I could probably
Oh,
go book,
yeah, well,
but
book
movies,
book's the
movies
last
tougher.
question. So,
Oh, is it? Is it?
yeah, so we won't skip there yet.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Let's not do that.
All right.
Yeah,
Is it?
movie. What's the best thing I've seen this year? Actually, I like Australian films. I thought there's a film called The Daughter, which didn't get nearly enough recognition. That came out probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
That was a really, really fantastic piece of Australian cinema. So we'll just lock that in.
Yeah, awesome. We got there. now, now, Nick, going back to your university days, you studied law and economics. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And I suppose what I mean, I remember you told me a particular story in which you decided that you didn't want to be a lawyer. I suppose it was a great story. I hope you would be able to share that story. I suppose that moment when you realized that you didn't really want to be a lawyer and you wanted to do something else.
Of course, and I think I should preface this with it's a great story, but it had been dawning on me for some time that my future probably wasn't in the law, and that I'd probably just studied the law um, to prove my parents wrong. Uh,
Right. Always a
but
good reason.
yeah, always a great reason to do something. No, but I got an internship or a clerkship with a QC in Brisbane, a fairly senior QC, and I was pretty excited about it actually. I thought this is going to be great, and for me, I was always more attracted to the courtroom and the theatre than I was
Mm,
necessarily to sitting around reading cases.
yeah.
And actually, the first time when I walked in, I started on a Monday morning. I got there at 7 a.m., very,
Yeah.
doing your duty, getting in nice and early. And
Yeah.
I asked the barrister who I was working for how his weekend was. And he
Yeah.
responded with, Nick, I haven't had a weekend off in 3 years. Um, Followed up with, if you want to be a lawyer, get used to it.
Wow.
In which case, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't want to be a lawyer and I don't plan on getting used to it. So, and I think the worst thing about that experience was the kind of soul destroyingness of the case that we were working on. And I don't need to go into too many details, but you know, it was a case involving a family dispute over a will that seemed so clear to anyone who just looked at the situation, but had spent 10 years in litigation with multiple parties litigating against one another, and the,
There
the
was quite a
families.
chain of people suing each other, I believe.
Yeah, there was an incorrect. Well, the accusation by one half of the family was that the will was incorrectly drafted, so they were suing the lawyers. The lawyers were then saying that, well, it was drafted on incorrect advice by the accountants, so they were suing the accountants.
Yeah.
Both parties were also in litigation with their respective insurers who weren't covering the claim, and so on and on it went.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just actually thought this is not what I want to be involved in.
Yeah.
This is pretty awful.
Yeah.
So I founded with my roommate at the time, Ryan, who was equally as despondent about his a PhD that he was doing at the time in
Yeah.
psychology. We decided that the paths that we chose probably weren't the paths for us, and we founded Max Kelsen that week.
And yeah, that week. So I was about to say, so you were there for only a few days, like
I lasted a week. Yeah.
a week. Yeah. Well, you clear. I did last a week. I'll hang on to that week.
Yeah.
Aw-
Yeah. People
Awesome.
say, did you ever practice? I was like, well, I went to court for a week.
Yeah, you did your time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So so you decided you did the week. It wasn't for you. And this was back in 2015. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you decided to start your own thing. Um, I suppose what that process of starting out, would you be able to give some insight into how Max Kelsen was formed?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's a little unfair to say that it formed that day, but it was really, I'd been, through uni, I'd been putting myself through uni consulting to businesses on various technology, um, questions, setting up cloud environments, and doing sort of technical stuff that I could make a good buck from, and work
Yeah,
around uni and work from home predominantly. And so I had a few clients already that I was working with, and a lot of them were sort of asking to do a bit more. And so
yeah,
what really was a way to pay my way through law school was what became
wow,
something much bigger. And I always sort of had the hypothesis that we're in 2015, but even if you rewind to 2011, 2012, I mean, this is the birth of the age of big data, right? Where every business was talking about how big data was going to solve every problem, and that they had the big datas, and we needed more data, and so on and so on it went. But what my observation was with the clients that I was working with, is that while they were collecting more data than ever, and they were getting rewards programs to collect more customer data and so on and so forth, they were really, all of them, struggling to actually get any insight out of that data.
insights out of the data.
Yeah, and really do anything with it. It just became this kind of whale that cost them lots of money to store.
Yeah,
um, and that kind of promise of, well, you'll know everything about your customers, and then you'll be able to better target them, and grow your revenue. It just really wasn't materializing, and I think that's the piece that Max Kelsen was really interested in solving. Is our original tagline, which we've changed, but it was big data, big ideas, and the idea was that actually you could take big data and turn it into something, and it wasn't just
yeah,
this big whale that sat in the data center.
yeah. That's awesome. Tell us about the name, how the Max Kelsen, the name.
So it's actually it's an amalgamation of the end of my surname Therkelsen and
Yeah,
Ryan, my co-founder's first name, which was his nickname, sorry,
yeah.
was surname's McStay, which got shortened in high school to Macca, which became Max.
Okay, Max.
I didn't know him in
Yeah,
high school, but we actually chose the name when we were backpacking around India many years before Max
wow.
Kelsen came about, for a completely unrelated purpose. And that purpose was quickly abandoned, but the name managed to stick around somewhere, and got
Yeah.
another life.
Is that purpose okay for the airways or?
Oh yeah, and you see them now. Actually, it's funny, but in far east India, right on the Pakistani border, they make bags out of camel leather and goat leather. Um,
Right.
and you could buy them then for sort of $9 Australian, $10 Australian, and they're really nice bags, right? Handmade
Yeah,
leather
yeah,
bags. So we thought we'd import those, and set up a little Shopify shop, and sell
yeah,
these bags. And actually, a number of people have done that since, and I see them around all the time now, which is kind of funny. But
yeah,
it all got too difficult trying to deal between traders in India and customs and etc. And we
Yeah.
abandoned that idea.
So, so you quickly pivoted from the leather industry to the data science industry.
I pivoted from the leather industry via law school to the data science
Yeah,
industry.
finally. So, what was the first major thing that you guys worked on?
Wow, that is probably taking me
I
back.
suppose what was the breakthrough point for you guys?
We actually started quite a few of our clients in the early days are from the music industry.
Yeah.
And we were looking at, sort of working with artists that are household names to look at like Spotify trend data, where their listeners are, who they are, and therefore what should promoters be doing to get them, where they should be focusing their efforts to get them to
Hmm.
their events, or even, if you lose an act on a festival like Splendor in the Grass, right? Who
Yeah.
should replace that act? Who's got
Yeah.
the most crossover that you can get with the types of people that would listen to the act that you lost? So,
Mm. That's
kind of
interesting.
using data to make the music industry more efficient, and that's certainly, like, we don't really operate in that space anymore. But it's something that we stay close to, and it's interesting actually that the industry is becoming more and more and more data driven, even at the kind of local promoting levels, and the
Yeah.
likes of streaming services have really opened that up and allowed that to happen, which is super cool.
Mm. Yeah. Awesome. And then now today, we just got back from Think 2019. That's actually where I met you in San Francisco. And Max Kelsen delivered two presentations at Think. Would you be able
Yep.
to talk about some of the exciting work that you guys are working on now?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, Think was awesome. We had lots of fun, and that was my second year at Think, and I much preferred this year because I much prefer San Francisco
Las Vegas.
to Vegas. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I thought it was a really good conference, and it was,
City of
it's
high
always quite,
convenience.
yeah, and it's quite humbling to be invited to speak at a global conference like Think.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
definitely don't take that lightly. So we had two talks. The first talk we gave was with our friend Adam about the work that we do in cancer genomics. So we have a,
Mhm.
a federally funded project that the federal government through the CRCP program have put in $2.5 million, and then we've got industry partners to bring in to basically cap that up to about $9.1 million. And
Yeah.
the focus of our work is to look at basically, we're looking at outcome prediction for new cancer treatments, and we're particularly
Mhm.
interested in the immunotherapy space, which is where a lot of pharmaceutical R&D is focused at the moment for oncology. And the thing about immunotherapies is that they can be, incredibly effective
Yeah.
drugs, and the side effects can be much lower. And we're talking about it, an orally administered drug instead of chemotherapy, right?
Mhm.
So, but the problem with that is that their response rates are very difficult. They're quite low, so sort of 15 to 42%, depending on the drug and depending on the tumor it's targeting,
Wow.
and that those responders are very difficult to determine. So whilst we know that some biomarkers play an influence in, so whether you're expressing X gene or Y gene plays an influence uh, in whether you'll respond or not, it's nowhere near accurate enough to be relied on. And
Right.
and the problem is really that until we have companion diagnostics that are accurate, we're talking about drugs that cost the taxpayer or the patient, depending on whether they're subsidized or not, upwards of $250,000.
Yeah.
So they're very, very expensive. And so we want to make sure that we're giving them to the right patients at the right time with the right cancer. So
Yeah.
what we're interested in is taking, and we're sequencing hundreds of lung cancer patients here in Brisbane, and watching them as they're treated with immunotherapy in late stage lung cancer, and then
Wow.
looking to train an AI algorithm or a machine learning or deep learning algorithm that can um, look at the multi modes of like there's multiple modes of genomic data. So you have the genome, which is the ACGT layer, but then you've also got the RNA layer. You've got you know you can break out your genome into somatic mutations and copy numbers, and then there's also
Yeah.
proteomics and methylation and a range of other biomarkers that we're interested in. So um, teach, constructing a model that can look at all of that data and work out whether a patient is going to respond to that treatment or whether
Yeah,
they're not going to
okay.
respond. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
So,
suppose that
sorry,
would be
Don.
like, yeah, it'd be extremely rewarding. I suppose to not just be working in a field that you're passionate about, but also to be applying that field of machine learning and AI to something that's really going to be helping people.
Yeah, it is. Inspiring is exactly the word. We're very fortunate to have the funding and to have the partners that we have to work on the project. It is quite amazing to take what we
Mm,
know and what we're good at and be able to apply it to something that can have such real impact. I was giving a talk on this at the Rare Cancers Australia event that they hold every year at Parliament House in Canberra. I was talking about the research we were doing, and someone actually came up to me afterwards, and she was a lung cancer sufferer, and she just described what whilst it probably wasn't going to help her, but the hope it gave her, and
yeah,
how much how it actually affected her as a sufferer to know that this work was happening and that it might be better
yeah.
for people in the future. It was a totally profound experience for me.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
awesome. And I remember seeing the same thing happen at Think, when people were just coming up to you and sharing their stories, their life stories, or of their own suffering, or people that they know, and yeah, they really like look look to you with I suppose, yeah, like inspiration and hope.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about cancer is it affects all of us, right? If it's not directly, it's a family member or a close friend.
Yeah.
So it's a universal feeling to want to fight this thing.
Mm.
I think we're just doing our tiny little bit, right? And we're
Yeah.
we're building on the shoulders of giants. But I think that's a good segue into how I think applied ML projects work best. For us, we're a group of people that are very, very focused on machine learning and deep learning techniques. And when we have the most success is when we partner with experts in their field to use what we
Yeah.
do and apply it to something that they deeply understand and know. And I just
Exactly.
think that's where we don't pretend to know everything about genomics or cancer, right? We couldn't get anywhere near it. But
Yeah.
what we can do is help accelerate what other people have been working on by using some of these computational techniques.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you touched on some of the partners, and I know you mentioned Google Brain was one of those. Would you be able to touch on a couple other partners you guys are working with?
Yeah, so obviously Google, but over, IBM has also supported us, and Adam's been a great help in providing us with compute power, that we can use and test our
And
models on.
you guys very much need that compute power, because I mean you spoke about big data, but you guys, a lot of people speak about data, but you guys really are in big data, in the petabyte range. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, if you think that a single human genome in its compressed form is 300 gig.
Yeah.
So you have hundreds or thousands of people that you've sequenced, and the petabyte number racks up pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
compute is hugely important. But so we're partnering. So we've got IBM and Google and the technology side. Our partners Genomica, who are another startup based in Queensland, who are experts in cancer genomics, are really the subject matter expertise. We
Right.
partner with QIMR, which is the Queensland Institute of Medical Research. And
Mhm.
so they provide obviously a lot of expertise and resources for us, particularly from the cancer side. With the local hospital system here, so Queensland Health, Metro North Health and Hospital System, who are actually,
Yeah.
we're working
Awesome.
with one of their oncologists who's biopsying these lung cancer patients and allowing us to sequence them and follow their treatment, which none of this would be possible without that. And then finally, we work with BGI, who are a sequencer manufacturer out of Shenzhen in China. And they are running all of our samples through their machines for free, which is really
Yeah.
$3 or $4 million worth of sequencing, which is incredible.
Wow. Yeah.
So and BGI actually have a next gen sequencer in Brisbane, so it's quite amazing to see. We sort of take the patient downstairs in Aurora, Brisbane, biopsy them, and then it goes to QPath, which is down the hall, and then up to the sequencer, which is in the next room, and then to our
Yeah.
our team. So it's
That's
pretty cool to
awesome.
see it all happening in one place, and so many teams and companies working together to hopefully achieve an outcome that will improve
Yeah.
patient experience and ultimately hopefully save lives.
Yeah, that's no, it's actually yeah, it's really really amazing. Um, I suppose in the context of time, I mean that's just one thing you guys are working on. You've also done a bunch of work in the natural language processing, and you guys are also doing some work on quantum. Would you be able to just touch on some of the other areas you guys are working on?
Yeah, of course. So the second talk we gave, I think, was about our NLP platform, cognitiveCX, that we've been building for a couple of years, and it's used by quite a few companies and governments now, including probably our cornerstone client, I guess, is New South Wales government, who use it to help understand citizen attitudes towards the government and the citizen experience through any channel, social media, etc. Which
Yeah,
is super exciting, and it's being used across the whole government. So we gave a talk about just the evolution of that platform, and it's been interesting for us as a consulting business to spin out a product and really see that grow. But it takes a huge amount of respect before, but especially after this, for people that are able to build a product from the ground up and
yeah,
grow it, and I think a lot of people look at your Atlassians and your Slacks and kind of go, oh, it's overnight success, but so much work goes into getting a product exactly right to solve its users' problems,
yeah,
and that balance between design and UX, and then what's technically possible, and what your users are demanding, and just getting all those pieces right,
mm,
is a huge challenge. So we've certainly been going on that journey, and then there's just scaling it, right? We've got now users ingesting millions and millions of documents.
yeah,
So building a platform that's scalable and can really meet their needs has been it's been a challenge, and that was some of what we talked about. And then in quantum, I mean, I guess at quantum, where we got one eye on, it's kind of one of those things that you know it's coming. You don't really know
yeah,
that yet. When a lot of the estimates are sort of really 10 years away until we have something that's
yeah.
useful.
I heard five.
Yeah, I hear five as well. IBM are pushing the five
Yeah,
number a bit. Let's say 5 to 10. And
yeah,
and it all depends on the use case, right? There's use cases today that make a lot of sense on noisy quantum machines. There's not a lot of them happening, but that they'll happen more around that 5 year horizon. But other problems
mm,
are going to take a bit longer to solve. So we kind of looked at this going, well, we want to make sure that as a consultancy that's offering advice and services to our clients, and they're really looking at us to be thought leaders in emerging technologies. We need to have a solid understanding of quantum and what it means, particularly for ML and deep learning. And
yeah,
we took the view that it actually, instead of kind of doing some experiments like implementing Boltzmann machines on noisy quantum machines, which is what a lot of people are doing, or you know looking at little problems that might work. We kind of took the view that maybe machine learning can offer something to quantum, right? Instead
mhm,
of the other way around. And so we've had a team over summer working on essentially quantum state preparation using reinforcement learning. So
mhm,
they've developed a gym around IBM's QuizKit, which is a simulator for building quantum applications, and it designs the RL agent designs. You give it a desired state, and it works to design the quantum circuit that you need to achieve that state. And at the moment,
which is otherwise a manual process normally.
yes, that's right. And as the number of qubits scale and as the complexity scales, it becomes very, very difficult. So
Mhm,
there's a lot of there's a fair bit of research going into this space. But we've got at the moment on sort of limited qubit simulations, it's constructing circuits that you would expect a quantum physicist in uni to be able to construct. So it's certainly
right.
learning the dynamics and coming to logical results, which is really exciting. So our next
Mhm,
step is to bring in some of the lower level APIs that IBM are making available to look at the observation error and be able to optimize on a few different variables. So we're keep pushing in that space, and I'm really
yeah.
excited to see where that project goes.
Awesome, awesome. There's obviously, yeah. I mean, quantum's just one of the things that's coming in our future. We were exposed to a lot of things that are coming, even at Think. Is
Mm.
there anything that particularly excites you in the field of, I mean, ML and AI, or even just technology that that you can see coming, on our horizon?
Where do you even start? I
Yeah,
think
well, maybe not everything that excites you, but is there one thing in particular?
I think this year, one of the things that's really excited me, and it's sort of late last year and early this year, is the transformer models in natural language. So you kind of UMFit, OpenAI transformer, Elmo, BERT, Transformer XL, and GP2. This is, this sort of cracking of transfer learning, which has been really the secret sauce to the image, the image analysis or world.
Yeah,
Image analytics theoretically has exceeded human performance. I debate that, but in some use cases, it exceeds human performance these
yeah,
days. That's really built on the back of the transfer learning paradigm, and it was something that language really struggled with until we went down the transformer road, and have really managed to crack that. I still think that there's a lot of the transfer learning, say on top of BERT, and particularly BERT large, is very inefficient, and with smaller corpuses of domain specific text, you can actually get worse results after transfer learning than just doing downstream tasks straight on top of the transformer. But I think this offers a really massive paradigm shift in natural language. And
mm,
if we think about the way that humans interface with devices, right? That whilst we've been moving to voice and to language more over the years, it's still been a struggle. I mean, people still, Siri still kind of
yeah.
sucks.
Seriously, kind of gets it wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, Google Assistant isn't really that much better. It's good at kind of doing voice-enabled Google searches, but it's
yeah,
not you're not able to have a fluid conversation,
yeah,
with your device, or with a
mm,
device, or even going down to, right, like asking data questions in natural language and all these things. And
yeah,
I think that what we're seeing now is going to form a really a really massive building block that's going to open up a whole lot of use cases that were
yeah.
previously unachievable because of the limitations in the tech. So that's probably the thing that's got me most excited at the moment.
And it sort of stagnated for a while until this, correct?
Yeah, we really struggled to improve on, 2011. I think Word2Vec came out, and you can take Word2Vec and implement that in logistic regressors, and get better performance than some dense net approaches that people were doing, and CNN approaches that people were doing.
Mm,
So we've really struggled to, and you can see it in like the glue benchmark scores, right? They really bottom out, and then we've obviously started to smash them again.
taken off, and
Yeah.
it's only been like the last month as well. I think it was while we were in Think.
Yeah, so obviously the
Yeah,
OpenAI GP2 model dropped while we were at Think, and it sent
yeah,
the world a little bit crazy, you know,
yeah,
uh, because they were like, we won't release it in case people use it nefariously. I think it's probably a naive point of view. If OpenAI can do it, and really it's a scaled up version of what's come before it, right?
yeah,
So I
and
think anyone
that's
can do it.
exactly what I was thinking. It's like, just because you don't release it, that it doesn't mean that someone else isn't going to be able to replicate that, in a matter of months.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, they released the code, right? So it
Yeah.
actually wouldn't be very difficult for someone to go, if they have sufficient compute resources and data sets to build that sort of model themselves, and maybe even build a bigger one. Which does bring up a point that we have to work out how we live in a world where we can't trust what we see
Mm.
thanks to
It,
GANs, what we
it
hear
it was.
thanks to GANs, and what we read, right?
Yes, I mean, so we saw the fake news generator, and then there's obviously the deep faking, like placing
Yep.
someone's face over Obama, and all that sort of stuff, and then you imagine the world of like just the other week I got a call from a fake robot telling me that I was going to go to jail because I didn't pay my taxes, and I
Oh,
and I
I
hung up.
get that call all the time.
Yeah, and I hung up straight away because it's so clearly obvious that it's fake. But if you think about this emerging technology and then you apply it to a phishing call like that, I mean,
Yep.
it would actually be extremely it's very scary to think, the amount of people in the world that, would fall for something like that. And then, I suppose the second piece to that is, what there's always a battle of yin and yang. You're like, what's the piece of work to try and detect when, an AI phishing agent has called somebody, and then, cut the call from the call center, or whatever it has to be.
Exactly right. And
It's
we actually have clients that have talked to us about the exact scenario that you brought up, right? They're worried that if you take a bank, for example, um, they've done a lot to harden their internet security. They've done a lot of,
yeah.
there's a whole lot of protections there. But actually, if you think about the contact center, it's quite a weakly
This is
protected part of
a
the
whole new
bank.
world.
Yeah, yeah. So they can no longer trust that the person on the end of the phone exists, let alone is the
Yeah,
person they say they are, right? So
yeah,
I think there's a whole lot of things that we've got to work through, and I don't see, whilst there are people having these conversations, I don't see a lot of money and resources going into detecting either deep fakes or fake
yeah.
caller attacks or fake news. I think that that's an area that probably needs
Needs a
some
bit more work.
focus. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it probably needs some investment, right? To let people start to build it. It's the old internet security thing. You kind of hired hackers to protect your
yeah,
protect your stuff. I think
yeah,
it's going to be the same
exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. We could spend a lot more time on that, but I suppose the road for you and for Max Kelsen, I mean, you guys are 4 years in, you've already achieved so much, but there's obviously going to be a long, bright future ahead for you guys. What do you see the long term vision goal being for Max Kelsen?
um, it's a really good question. I think the long vision goal for us is obviously to keep growing and keep investing in areas like our cancer research and our NLP platform. But most importantly, we want to foster a team of people that is seen as being that world leading in the research that they produce and in the way that
Yeah,
they're helping push the ML the ML field forwards. Right. I don't see in Australia, in America, you've got OpenAI and Google Brain and others, and in the UK, obviously DeepMind, and I don't see a kind of a private organization that really flies the flag here,
in
like
Australia.
like those do there, or Element AI does in Canada.
Yeah,
I hope that Max Kelsen can be that that
one day
group,
get there.
yeah, that people go, I really respect their work, and I think that they're pushing boundaries, and that's what we aspire to do, and that's what gets us up in the morning is not only
Yeah,
to solve our clients' problems in the best way possible and create value for them, but to do that whilst we're really innovating and contributing to the broader effort of
yeah.
ML and deep learning.
You said get up in the morning. I thought that you didn't sleep.
Occasionally.
Okay,
No, I love
okay.
sleep. I love sleep. I couldn't operate without it.
How many hours do you get per night, out of curiosity?
Actually, 6 to 7
Oh,
normally. Yeah.
okay.
So
Not
no,
bad.
I'm very conscious that actually, if I don't sleep, I'm not at my best.
Yeah.
And so the extra hour or two that you might be able to get, it's just it's more of a negative than it is a positive, I think.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, yeah, and I think understanding, and I've got a lot of friends that are founders, and yeah, particularly the first couple of years can be extremely taxing.
Yeah.
I've always been conscious that you have to set yourself up to work in a sustainable way,
Mhm.
and that's when you're going to do your best work, and that's something that you can just keep going because it's, as you said, it's a marathon. It's like
It's a marathon. Yeah.
you just have to keep pushing, particularly in the early stages of a business. So you've got to
Yeah.
be sustainable. But I also want that to be reflected to my team, right? I don't want my
Yeah.
team to feel like they're expected to be in early or they're expected to be in late. I want them to work
Yeah.
standard working hours, and I kind of have a view that that's what a healthy business looks like. A healthy business looks
Yeah.
like people walking out the door when they want to, or
Yeah.
coming in when they want to, and people not having to work crazy hours to get the work out that they're meant to. By all means, if they want to work more and particularly diving into interesting problems, then
Go nuts.
go nuts. But at the same time, if then they want to take time off, elsewhere to to have family time or to do other things, then we
Yeah.
support them in that too, right?
Very,
So
very
um,
down to earth.
yeah, and I mean, I think that like you've got to lead by example.
Yeah.
If you're burning the midnight oil every night, then the people around you are gonna see that as an expectation
You're
that
gonna
they
feel
do
like they'll
too.
have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
One.
I try and not send emails outside work hours. Occasionally it happens, but I try not to, and
Mm.
try and not just try and not create that expectation that that's what you have to do to work here, because it's definitely not.
I think that's the only time you send me emails is outside work.
That might say more about where you
um,
are on my priority list. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, Um, Nick, one of the, I suppose one of the things that after meeting you, particularly I suppose like amazed me about you is that as the CEO of the company, you also you've taken the time obviously to really build that depth of technical knowledge as well. I suppose can you speak to that? I suppose that process of being able to sit on top of the business, but also having to get down in the weeds with the team and really understand exactly what they're doing.
I think that's I'm flattered by the observation. I'm certainly nowhere near as technically adept as my team are, but I think it's actually more through fascination and really loving the subject matter is why I am on top of the technical details. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't go to bed reading papers on archive on my iPad instead of reading a book these days. So I think the other thing is if we want to be an organization that is hired because we're the technical experts in this space, then that has to permeate everything we do from my role all the way down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess I just love it, so it's really easy.
Yeah, that's fair enough. For I suppose budding data scientists out there, would you have any tips or any keys? Things that you've learned through your machine learning and AI startup, and I suppose, in how they can look to develop themselves into a good or a great data scientist.
Yeah, of course. I've got maybe some controversial opinions on this, or maybe there's some
Right.
well, they won't make me a lot of friends. But I
Was that
guess
autocare?
no, I
That's all.
love autocars. I think my main piece of advice to people coming into this field is that, um, and it goes against what other people say a lot, but I think you have to
Mhm.
understand the math. You have to take the
Yeah.
time to really understand the math behind what these things are doing. And all too often, I meet people that it's kind of I've built the CNN, and you're like, okay, why? Or why have you made this decision? Oh, it's like, oh no, but that's because how it was in the code that I've used, right? They're not thinking
Yeah.
about what does the softmax function do? How does my activation function work?
Yeah.
You know, why would I do batch norm? There's this paper, actually, it was a talk at NeurIPS that I just thought was fantastic, and it was someone that had really just decided to work out why batch norm works, right? Because
Yeah.
someone came up with batch norm. They were like, oh, look, it improves my results. And then everyone just started applying batch norm. No one understood why it worked. And there were some theories out there. It turns out those theories were totally wrong. And it works for
Right.
a whole different set of reasons, which kind of means that then you learn when to use it, when not to use it, and when it's kind of masking
Yeah.
deeper problems. I do think if you want to really, there's going to be, and this is the thing, if you want to be a data scientist, just being able to build a model isn't going to be enough. Um,
Mhm.
because there's so many tools coming out now, like GUI based tools that allow people to build little models and stuff. Those are going to improve and they're going to get better and better. So just being able to
Yeah.
say take a whole lot of photos of hot dogs and photos of not hot dogs and put that into a CNN and go, hey, it's 95% accurate. That that can be done by anyone. In fact, I was sitting next to our head of sales, Cameron, on a flight the other day, and he had a demo with a prospective client, and they kind of wanted a hot dog, no hot dog thing. So
Yeah.
he just found some images on Google. He punched them into Google's AutoML. He built a classifier which was pretty robust, and then he demoed it to the client an hour later. Right, like Cameron has no technical expertise. He's a
Yeah.
salesperson, but
Sales.
he was able to do that on a flight in the morning, having never
Yeah.
done it before. So I think,
And
that
yeah, go on.
yeah, the distinction for people entering the field is really that they are going to be able to do things that those GUIs and that those tools like
Yeah,
AutoKeras can't do, right? AutoKeras, and I
yeah,
think AutoKeras is incredible, which is for the uninitiated, it's an advanced AutoML system that's come out of Google AI. It sits on top of Keras that will basically you feed it your input data, say your photos of hot dogs and no hot dogs, and it will search both the parameter space and the architecture, the network architecture space, to find the optimal architecture and
yeah. It's
hyperparameters
pretty
for that model, right? And
pretty amazing.
yeah, we demoed it at Think, and we showed that actually it was performing almost as well as our team of 4 data scientists on a problem for 3 months, right? But
Yeah,
the thing about AutoKeras, what I kind of remind people is AutoKeras never would have come up with the transformer. It never would have cracked transfer learning and NLP. That took people that deeply understood the problem and deeply understood the tech
yeah.
to take to take it to the next level. Tools like AutoKeras
Mhm.
will always follow what the
The
say
current standard.
exactly. So
Yeah,
that one of my piece of advice is math. The other piece of advice I really have is understand. You know, I think it's someone else's mantra, but I've stolen it. It's the data. It's the data, stupid, and it's always the data. And so
yeah,
if you don't learn ways to really be able to explore data, to be able to understand the dynamics of the data that you're working with, it's lineage, it's you know all the factors that are in that data set that you're working with, then you'll never be good at modeling. And the thing is that I see this a bit with particularly people who are starting out. They try and solve data problems with models,
yeah,
when it should be solved in pre-processing, or it should be solved at that level, where and you're never really going to be able to model your way around it. So having that view of always going back to the data and properly understanding the data and taking your time to really understanding a data set isn't understanding what the rows and columns are. It's so
yeah,
much more
yeah,
than that. So I'd
yeah,
always stress that having a good understanding of both data exploration, data manipulation, like in Pandas in the pre-processing stage, is vital to you being a great engineer,
yeah.
and building great models.
Awesome. Um, Nick, if you could recommend one book to somebody, what would it be?
One book to somebody, what would it be?
I know that this is what you tried to jump to at the start of the interview, and I had to halt you. So
Yeah.
we're nearing the end, and yeah, if you could recommend one book to somebody, it can be, or if you have more than one, it can be more than one.
Are we thinking just books to enjoy or books for them to read that are related to the industry?
It's up to you. It's really up to you. So, I mean, the book I usually recommend to people is, How Adam Smith Can Change Your Life, which is,
Yeah, yeah,
an economist that talks about, how people work and function. So,
yep.
it could be something technical. It could be something, it's sort of, on the self help or psychology sector. It could be Star Wars, whatever you want.
All right. So I'd recommend a couple of things. I'd recommend an old economics book on that theme, called Animal Spirits,
Mhm.
that really ushered in the period of behavioral economics. And as an economics major, I, always thought to
Yeah,
myself that the assumption that people are rational and therefore markets are rational,
I love behavioral
yeah,
economics.
was
It's so
absurd. Um,
yeah,
so that's a really important book, I think, to read and understand how human psychology influences the economy.
yeah,
And why purist rational economists are always wrong. That's a sly dig. I think on books that I think that everyone should read. Actually, I'm a huge fan of Franz Kafka, and I think that everyone at some point in their life should read The Trial. Um,
the trial.
the Trial, which is it's kind of Kafka, of course, has the yeah, you describe something as Kafkaesque, when it's particularly is particularly oblique and kind of wrapped in absurd bureaucracy, and that's really what the Trial is a book that really founded that term Kafkaesque, and I think it's an incredible novel, and Kafka is a fantastic writer. So that'd be my two: nonfiction and fiction.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, as we will call it.
It's
Um,
definitely
I'm really looking, yeah, definitely show now. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you and Max Kelsen are going to be doing in the future, and I suppose looking forward to watching you guys explode and grow.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to following what you do. I'm sure you're
Yeah, awesome.
destined for great things. So
And make sure you get a weekend this weekend.
I'll give it a crack.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much, mate. Chat to you soon.